Hello, everybody, and welcome here to the Wine with Jimmy channel. Thank you so much for stopping by. This is a channel completely dedicated to wine education, bringing you really all the information you need to know about the world of wine to get maximum enjoyment from it. If you do have a comment or question and you'd like to get in touch, you can leave your comment or question in the comments section below this video. Please do click like and subscribe as well. Now, this is a video on the Rheinhessen as a part of my Mastering Germany series. Very in-depth look at the world of German wine. This video is a free video available to all through the likes of YouTube, but all other parts and lots of other exclusive videos in the Mastering Germany series is only available to those of you who subscribe to the Wine with Jimmy Club. This is a monthly subscription service for less than a price of a cup of coffee, and you get lots of wonderful presentations and key food and wine matching, travel tips, and just lots of great wine tasting knowledge. Please do sign up. You can, of course, cancel at any time as well. So let's have a look here at the Rheinhessen, the largest wine region in the whole of Germany in terms of its grape growing and winemaking. So I'm going to go through things like its location, latitude, climate, weather, grape growing techniques, and all through things like geology and winemaking as well. Let's have a look then. So the first thing to focus on here is what topography wise really defines the Rheinhessen. And this is a slightly skewed map of it here, but you'll see the Rhine River running through here, right? It goes past the city of Worms and meanders here, goes past Mainz. It is filled and joined at the confluence by the River Main, goes past Wiesbaden and down here, right, it's kind of heading west at that point before it heads north. The Rheinhessen is this area down here, okay? So it's that bit which is below the east to west direction of the Rhine, and then between Mainz and Worms, okay? And that Rhine River is really the region's dominant feature, and hence why we call it the Rheinhessen. Hessen is historical in terms of the location, but Rhine for the river. One thing we will talk about a lot here is what we call the red slope, which is down this area. You see Nierstein and Oppenheim. And that is called the Rotter Hang, or the red slope. It's a steep embankment of vineyards directly on the River Rhine, facing mostly sort of east and southeast. It's studded with key villages like Nackenheim, like, of course, Nierstein, Oppenheim, for example. And there are very famous single vineyard sites that completely adorn all of those villages. So that's famous. There's a new modern area at the bottom around Worms, certainly in the Wollengau. But a lot of the hinterland and the central lands of the Rheinhessen really didn't come into fore until very recent times. Now, let's talk a little bit about a bit of its topography again. Let's go to another map. And here you will see, I'm going to do some scribbling for you because I think it's probably one of the best ways to sort this out. But here you'll see, let's make that a bit thicker. Here's the River Rhine, okay? It goes past Worms, it then meanders nicely here as it goes past the Rotterhang, then up towards Mainz and Wiesbaden before coming all the way across here and then up that way. So that is our River Rhine, okay, our defining feature, and the Rheinhessen sits in that middle area. We call this area the Mainzer Becken, or the Mainz Basin. Now, this depression was formed during the Tertiary period, which was 38 to 12 million years ago, and it was then filled by an inland sea, with things like a vast coral reef and lots of animals living and dying within it. The sea and the reef have long gone, they have disappeared, but all of their remains and their calcareous remains have been embedded as soil in many parts of this area, and hence why we have a lot of wonderful rolling hills and limestone plateaus featured in this landscape. Now, these plateaus are crossed and intersected by broad valleys of gentle hills and sweeping lowlands. The highest areas are up to about 300 meters, that's close to 1,000 feet, whilst the lowlands will actually average around 150 meters, that's near 500 feet. In the Rheinhessen's west, there is an area which is fairly hilly and mountainous. So it's this area up here, which is called the Rheinhessische Schweiz. The Rheinhessische Schweiz. Schweiz will be a different thing. This is the Rheinhessen Switzerland area. And this is forested. And it's a very important area that kind of separates the Nahe from the Rheinhessen, so two wine regions. Now, the river I mentioned is significant, the Rhine. I've drawn this already on here. It's so wide and quite deep in places that, in fact, it often acts more like a lake in terms of what benefits it can give rather than a river. So you'll often find light, reflection, heat, retention, great airflow from this area. So vineyards really do benefit from being close to the Rhine River. Another river, which I'll draw in a slightly smaller size here, and I'll do it in a slightly different color blue, is the Seltz River. And this river is what runs from kind of this direction, comes through here, and then finally comes into the Rhine. So this is the Seltz River. It runs for about 38 miles through Rheinhessen. That's about 61 kilometers, starting at the village of Orbis, and then goes past Ingelheim into the Rhine River. Now, there are quite a few important vineyards located here around, say, the likes of south of Ingelheim. So when you are looking at Grand Cru sites like Parez or Horn, and then going down to places like Solsheim as well. So it's not just vineyards situated close to the river. There are also tributary rivers to be focused upon as well. So that's the Seltz River. Now we're going to talk a little bit about the latitude and how that then translates into the climate and weather. The latitude of most of the Rheinhessen is at 49 degrees north. And that sits at about the same latitude as the Mosel, but it is quite different climatically. So yes, it's the same latitude, and it's only about 100 miles between the Mosel and the Rheinhessen. That's about 160 kilometers. But the Rheinhessen is notably warmer, and it's notably drier as well. And this is majorly due to the rain shadow effect of the low mountain ranges that run along its western edge. So this is what we will call the Hunsrück mountain range. Let's take a closer look at those on the next slide. So here you'll see that and the green circle is the Rheinhessen area. You'll see the Hunsrück, which is immediately to the west. There's also the Taunus or Taunus mountains that sit to the north of the Rheingau area. Now, both the Taunus mountains to the north and the Hunsrück to the west will offer sheltering protection for the Rheinhessen against things like wind and rain. The Rhine Valley opens up to the east, and that's, of course, your way towards, say, the Hissitzebergstrasse and towards places like Franken and Württemberg. The Rheinhessen boasts quite a high annual average of sunlight hours. And you'll see it on your screen there, 1,700, but gets quite low rainfall. It's about 530 millimeters. That's about 21 inches. And about 2/3 of that fall in the growing season. So that's around 14 inches, around 350 millimeters. The average annual temperature is 11.1. The growing season is 15.6, so it falls into still a cool climate. but some vintages can be beyond that. 280 days for vegetation period. This is really great for long, slow ripening, especially great for Riesling. And the temperatures along the Rhine are warmer than the interior because of the moderating effect of the Rhine. Autumns are generally quite late to arrive. Winters can be fairly mild. And the viticultural risks here are things like spring frosts, drought, and then heat stress. And certainly there's a little bit of fungal disease as well. Now, let's get really to grips with the earth. Let's get down to earth and look at the geology and soils. Here's another map identifying the Rheinhessen area. You'll see to the north, you have Wiesbaden and Mainz. You have to the south, the city of Worms, for example. Now, what I'm showing you here is the dominating soil in the middle, which is actually across many parts of Rheinhessen. And this is loess, and then some specific geographical geological soils, so located in certain areas, such as around Bingen, such as around Nierstein, outside of Worms, and on the border of Nahe. So let's go through those. About half of the Rheinhessen is covered by this wind-blown loess. Now, this was deposited during the Ice Age, and it reaches depths of up to around 15 meters, sometimes 50 feet. The lowland areas can contain softer marl soils. So let's start to talk about the top right-hand corner of your slide. This is Rotliegendes surface soils, and these are the ones that really come out in the extreme sort of west, say southwest of the Rheinhessen, really classically around places like Nierstein and Oppenheim. It's the major soil type of the Roter Hang. It's this iron-based soil. And if you want more information on this soil specifically, please do look at my first series on mastering Germany when I go into the geology in great detail. We're now going to jump to the top left-hand corner, which is pointing around the town of Bingen. And this is where we find a connection to the Rheingau to the north and the Mosel and the Nahe that sits towards the west. This is where we find Devonian quartzite and blue-grey slate, famed around the Bingen area. So Riesling and Spätburgunder does quite well here. Coming down to the bottom left picture, this is where we find volcanic porphyry and melaphyr. This is located around Siefersheim on the border of Nahe. Nahe is exceptionally famous for varying amounts of volcanic soils. And then finally, the bottom right-hand corner is pointing just to the immediacy and to the west of Worms. And this is the Wonnengau. It's a bedrock of limestone with then clay-rich marl that are high in lime on top of that. And this is classic for producers around Florsheim, Dalsheim, for example, Molsheim and Westhofen. So really wonderful expression here of quite complex geology. Let's start to talk about the grape growing then in general. Most of Rheinhessen is on flatter land that's fertile, and then there's some low rolling hills like you see in your picture. You can mechanically harvest these sites. Some of them will require hand harvesting and pruning, however, but most vineyards in the larger interior will be contiguous, certainly been a result of Flurbereinigung, which is vineyard reorganization to make them more easy, accessible, larger. And the average vineyard elevation is quite low at about 175 meters. That's about 570 feet. And the slope is quite a low gradient on average, about 7%. Further, though, we do need to identify that there are some steeper areas, as I'm sure you will be aware. So you'll see a picture here of the Roter Hang, which is around Nierstein Oppenheim, Nackenheim, and that's very steep as it goes down to the Rhine River with those Rotliegendes soils, those lovely red iron-rich soils. But also around Sieversheim on the Nacher border, Bingen in the north on the Rhine near the Rheingau, and Ingolsheim also in that same area. We get steep slopes. Most expositions are east, southeast, or southwest. Harvests are typically in September, but you can compress that period depending on the weather conditions. Next is just something of a little bit of uniqueness on the landscape. And that's what you see here. Rheinhessen's vineyards are dotted with these small stone, often conical structures known in a local dialect as Vineyard, which are vineyard houses, or Trulli, which is also a name you'll find in Pulian vineyards in the south of Italy. They're 18th to the 19th century, and they're used for vineyard workers, tool storage, and potentially an odd nap. But by the 1980s, they had fallen in most sort of disrepair and disuse. But they are iconic, and they may be being brought back to life. Now, Rheinhessen's mild, drier climate, remember, on average about 530 millimeters of rain per year, and its generally flat landscape lends itself to organic and therefore biodynamic viticulture. As of 2023, 11% of the total vineyard area was cultivated organically or biodynamically. EcoVan, one of Germany's leading associations for organic wine growing, was founded in the Rheinhessen in 1985. That has today 200 members throughout Germany and is headquartered on the Rotliegendes in Oppenheim. So let's look at some of the trade structure here, and this leads into winemaking. So we know that 1/3 of German wine is produced in Rheinhessen. 73% of the wine in the Rheinhessen is made by Kellereien, which is large-scale negociants. That's on the left-hand side of your screen. 22% by independent estates and 5% by cooperatives. Remember, co-ops have never really grown a foothold in this landscape. So 5%, it's six cooperatives in total. The largest cooperative is one called Bezirkswinzergenossenschaft Wonengau in Monsheim. Bezirkswinzergenossenschaft. It has 160 members and is an exceptionally long German word which will put Welsh village names to shame. Next is the colours of the wine. So 72% of the production is white, 18% is red, and 10% pink. The pink wine production, by the way, includes the rosé styles of Weißherbst, Riesling, and the still Blanc de Noir. Around half of the production is dry. And Sekt is also an important category, from simple Secco to long-aged hobby Sekt or Winzer Sekt made in the region. And then finally, looking at the influence of the Verband Deutsche Predikatsweingüter, the VDP. If you want more information on exactly what the VDP is, please do look at my introduction series to Mastering Germany. The VDB has 19 members in the Rheinhessen, which totals about 473 hectares. That's about 1,100 acres, or 1.7% of the total land. There are only 2 permitted grape varieties for the Rheinhessen for GGs, and that is Riesling and Spätburgunder. That brings me to a conclusion for grape growing and winemaking here in the Rheinhessen. Please do join me for part 4, where I'm going into detail about key specific sites in the Nierstein, including areas like Nackenheim, Oppenheim, and the Rote Hang. I will also go on to places like, in part 5, the Wonengau, and then in part 6, Bingen. These videos, including parts 1 and 2, are only available to those of you who subscribe to the Wine with Jimmy Club, which is only £3.99 a month, with lots of extra goodies, tasting notes, wine and food recommends, travel tips. It's really very useful for those of you for less than a cup of coffee a month. If you do have any comments or questions, please do get in touch. But until next time, Dankeschön, and see you again.